The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Daniel's legs trembled as he climbed over a fallen log, his body screaming in protest. He had been walking for 3 long days without proper food. His backpack, heavy with tools and supplies for survival, was empty of anything to eat, and every step felt heavier than the last. His stomach growled painfully, reminding him of the meals he had taken for granted at home. But giving up was never in his nature. He had to keep moving. The forest around him was quiet, almost too quiet. The wind whispered softly through the tall pine trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and moss. Occasionally, a bird's distant call broke the silence, but it felt lonely rather than comforting. Daniel's mind wandered to thoughts of warmth, of cooked meals, and of the safety he had left behind in his small town. He remembered the map he had studied before starting this hike. Somewhere not too far ahead was a place marked abandoned shelter. That tiny phrase had become his beacon of hope. Every step was painful. His shoes were worn, his socks damp with sweat and forest moisture, and his legs ached with each movement. He stumbled over a rock and cursed softly under his breath. Hunger and exhaustion made the trail seem endless. Yet he pushed on, thinking that if he could reach the shelter, everything might change. He imagined a roof over his head, a warm meal, and a moment to rest without fear. That vision kept him moving forward, despite the burning pain in his stomach and the trembling of his limbs. Hours seemed to stretch on forever. The sunlight faded slowly and the forest grew darker, shadows stretching across the uneven ground. Then through a gap in the trees he saw a shape. A building, small and weathered, stood almost hidden among the thick brush. Daniel's heart leapt with relief and excitement. Could this really be the shelter he had been searching for? He pushed through the bushes and reached the door. It creaked loudly as he opened it, the sound echoing in the still air. Dust rose from the floor, tickling his nose, but Daniel hardly noticed. He stepped inside, grateful for the safety and shelter. The room was small, with wooden walls darkened by years of weather. One broken window let in the last streaks of sunlight, illuminating a cot in the corner and a small wooden table covered in dust. Everything was old, forgotten, and yet it was perfect. Daniel sank onto the cot, feeling the weight of exhaustion press him down. His body ached, but he felt a strange comfort in knowing he would not have to sleep on the cold, hard ground tonight. He stood and began to search the shelter for something useful. In a dusty corner, he found a small metal box. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were a few cans of beans, a bottle of water, and a first aid kit. Relief washed over him like a wave. He drank the water greedily, savoring each cool drop, and opened a can of beans. The warmth and fullness returned strength to his tired body. As he ate, Daniel's eyes wandered across the walls. Strange carvings and symbols covered the wood. They were old, weathered by time, but they seemed purposeful, deliberate. He ran his fingers over the carvings, trying to understand their meaning. Though he could not read them, a shiver ran down his spine. The symbols felt alive, as if they had been waiting for someone to arrive. Night approached quickly. Daniel gathered some dry wood and built a small fire in the rusty fireplace. The flames danced and flickered, casting long shadows that made the walls seem to move. He wrapped himself in a thin, worn blanket, trying to find warmth against the cold creeping in through the broken window. The forest outside had grown dark and strange noises echoed through the trees. Daniel felt a shiver that was not entirely from the chill. Something about this shelter felt alive, almost as if it held secrets waiting to be discovered. Unable to resist, he returned to the carvings. By the light of the fire, he noticed something he had not seen before. One symbol glowed faintly, a soft light pulsing like a heartbeat. His curiosity overcame his exhaustion. He traced the glowing symbol with his finger, and suddenly, the floor beneath the cot shifted. Daniel jumped back, his heart racing. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a small space containing papers, old maps, and a wooden box. His hands shook as he lifted the box. Inside were objects unlike anything he had ever seen. A compass that did not point north, a crystal that seemed to hum softly, and a folded piece of paper covered in the same mysterious symbols that adorned the walls. Daniel's mind raced. This shelter was not ordinary. It had been abandoned, yes, but it had a purpose. It had waited for someone, and that someone seemed to be him. Daniel studied the items carefully. The crystal hummed softly in his hands, its light reflecting the fire's glow. The compass spun slowly, never settling on any direction. The paper with symbols intrigued him most. He unfolded it carefully, trying to make sense of the strange writing. Though he could not understand it, a sense of importance filled him. This shelter, hidden deep in the forest, held secrets that might change everything he thought he knew about his journey. As he sat by the fire, Daniel felt a shift within himself. Hunger and exhaustion were still there, but a new energy had replaced them. His mind felt sharper, more alert. The forest outside no longer seemed threatening. Instead, it felt protective, almost alive, as if it were guiding him toward something he could not yet see. He realized that this place had chosen him, or perhaps he had chosen it. Either way, the shelter had changed everything. Hours passed. Daniel could hear the wind outside, but it no longer sounded lonely. Instead, it carried whispers, soft and almost musical. He felt a connection with the forest, the shelter, and even the objects in the hidden compartment. He understood that the real journey was only beginning. The shelter was a beginning, not an end. He finally lay down on the cot, wrapping the blanket tightly around his tired body. Sleep was heavy but welcome. As he drifted off, the glow from the symbol on the wall pulsed once more, faintly illuminating the room. Daniel's last thought before sleep took him was that he was not just surviving anymore. He was part of something greater, something mysterious, and something that would soon reveal itself. In the darkness of the abandoned shelter, Daniel felt hope for the first time in days. Hunger would return, challenges would come, but now he had a place, a purpose, and a spark of discovery that promised his life would never be the same. The forest, the shelter, and the objects within it held secrets, and Daniel was ready to uncover them. The night stretched on, quiet but alive. Daniel slept, but the shelter seemed to breathe around him. It waited patiently for the morning, when the true adventure would begin. Morning broke softly in the forest, the sun rising slowly over the mountains and casting golden light through the broken window of the shelter. Daniel awoke on the cot, the thin blanket still wrapped around him. He felt stronger than he had in days. The warmth of the fire from the night before had faded, but he no longer shivered. Hunger had not entirely gone, but he had enough strength to move and think clearly. He stood and stretched, his sore muscles complaining at first, then relaxing as he walked to the small wooden table. He picked up the compass and the crystal from the hidden compartment, studying them carefully. The compass spun in slow, deliberate circles, never settling on a direction. Daniel frowned, intrigued and confused. The crystal hummed faintly, almost like a soft whisper. Its glow seemed brighter in the morning light. He held it in his hand, feeling a subtle warmth spread through his fingers, calming him. Curiosity pushed him to examine the folded paper with the strange symbols again. He spread it across the table and traced the marks with his finger. Some symbols were simple, others complex, looping in patterns he had never seen. Although he could not understand the meaning, he felt a strange connection to them. It was as if the paper was guiding him, asking him to look closer, to explore further. Daniel realized that this shelter was more than a place of rest. It was a puzzle, a map, and a doorway into something unknown. After a quick breakfast from the remaining cans of beans, Daniel decided to explore the shelter more thoroughly. He walked through every corner, examining the old furniture and broken windows. Behind the fireplace, he found another small panel of wood, almost invisible. With careful pressure, it swung open, revealing a narrow stairway leading downward. A faint, earthy smell rose from below. Daniel's heart beat faster. The shelter was hiding more than he had imagined. He grabbed a flashlight from his backpack and descended the stairs carefully. The wooden steps creaked under his weight. At the bottom, he found a small room carved into the rock beneath the shelter. The walls were rough, but the space was surprisingly large. Strange carvings continued here, etched deep into the stone. Torches, long burned out, lined the walls. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and on it rested another crystal, larger than the one he had found above. It pulsed with a steady, soft light, casting a calming glow across the room. Daniel approached the pedestal cautiously. The air felt alive here, charged with an energy he could not explain. As he reached for the crystal, the compass in his hand spun violently, then stopped, pointing directly toward the pedestal. Daniel froze, realizing the compass was somehow reacting to the crystal. He placed the smaller crystal beside it. The hum grew louder, filling the room with a sound both soothing and strange. The glow of the crystals brightened, illuminating a path along the far wall that had been invisible before. The path led to a carved door, covered in the same mysterious symbols from the paper. Daniel traced them carefully. They seemed to rearrange themselves subtly as he watched, almost as if the door were alive. He took a deep breath and pushed. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow corridor leading further underground. The air smelled of earth and something else, faintly metallic but not unpleasant. Daniel stepped forward cautiously, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. The corridor twisted and turned, lined with more carvings and symbols. Daniel's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Some symbols seemed to move in patterns, guiding him like a map. Others glowed faintly, pulsing as if breathing. He realized that the shelter was far older than it looked above ground. Someone or something had carefully designed this place to hide and protect whatever lay deeper underground. After walking for several minutes, Daniel reached a larger chamber. The walls were carved with elaborate scenes, forests, mountains, rivers, and creatures unlike anything he had seen. Some were vaguely human, others entirely strange, with wings, multiple limbs, or glowing eyes. The floor of the chamber was smooth stone, polished over time, and in the center stood a circular marking etched with symbols that glowed softly. The two crystals he carried hummed in response, their light intensifying and converging toward the center of the circle. Daniel knelt at the edge of the circle, studying the symbols. He had no idea what they meant, but he felt a pull, a silent invitation to step inside. His heartbeat quickened. Part of him was cautious, remembering the warnings his body had been sending since he started the hike. Yet another part of him felt drawn forward, as if something essential awaited him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the circle. The moment his feet touched the symbols, a wave of warmth and energy surged through him. It was not just physical. It was as if his mind had awakened, senses sharpened beyond normal human limits. He could hear the faintest rustle of leaves far above in the forest outside. He could see the patterns in the carvings more clearly, as if the symbols themselves were speaking to him. His hunger and fatigue seemed to fade, replaced by a newfound clarity. Daniel realized that the shelter, the crystals, and the symbols were connected to something ancient and powerful. Perhaps the shelter had been built to guide someone like him, someone capable of understanding and protecting its secrets. His excitement mixed with awe. The forest, the mountains, and this hidden chamber were all pieces of a greater mystery. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the chamber, like whispers carried by the wind. Daniel froze. The hum of the crystals grew louder, almost as if responding to the sound. Shadows flickered across the walls, and for a moment, he thought he saw figures moving in the carvings. Not real figures, but illusions created by the energy in the room. The sensation was both thrilling and unsettling. He took a step back and examined the chamber carefully. In one corner, he noticed a small opening, partially hidden behind a carved stone. He approached and crouched to look inside. Beyond the opening was a narrow tunnel, descending further into darkness. The air felt cooler here, and a faint breeze suggested it led to something larger. Daniel's heart raced with anticipation. This was clearly the next stage of the shelter's secret. He knew he had to explore it. Before entering the tunnel, Daniel checked his backpack. He packed the two crystals carefully, knowing their energy might be important for whatever lay ahead. He took a deep breath and stepped forward into the darkness, moving slowly and deliberately. The walls of the tunnel were rough but stable. Faint markings guided his way, glowing softly as if welcoming him. Daniel felt a strange sense of trust, almost as if the shelter itself was supporting him, leading him forward without danger. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was hard to tell. The tunnel eventually opened into another chamber, larger and brighter. Light poured in from cracks in the stone ceiling above, illuminating a small underground stream. The water sparkled clear and pure. On the other side of the stream, the tunnel continued, leading into a space filled with ancient machinery, strange devices, and more crystals embedded in the walls. The hum of energy was stronger here, almost vibrating through the floor beneath his feet. Daniel stood at the edge of the stream, taking in the sight. He realized that this underground world was more than a shelter. It was a place of knowledge, discovery, and power, preserved for someone worthy to find it. The hunger, the exhaustion, and the struggle to survive had all led him here. And now he understood that his journey had only just begun. The underground chamber called to him, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Daniel felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he could face them. He had survived hunger, isolation, and exhaustion. Now he would uncover the truth behind the shelter, the crystals, and the mysterious energy that pulsed through the hidden chambers beneath the forest. As he stepped across the stream and into the room of ancient devices, Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. The adventure that had begun with hunger and exhaustion had transformed into something far greater. He was no longer just a lone hiker lost in the mountains. He was a seeker of secrets chosen by the shelter, and ready to explore the mysteries hidden for generations. And somewhere in the shadows, the crystals pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if confirming that Daniel was on the right path, and that everything was about to change in ways he could never imagine. Daniel stepped carefully into the chamber, his eyes widening at the sight before him. The room was enormous, far larger than he had expected. Crystals embedded in the walls glowed softly, casting a shimmering light across the strange devices that filled the space. Some of the machines hummed gently, their purpose unclear. Others had levers, buttons, and dials, but Daniel could not guess what they did. The air was warm, tinged with a faint scent of minerals and electricity. He approached one of the devices. It looked like a large circular console, covered in symbols similar to those he had seen carved into the walls. When he placed his hand on it, the symbols lit up. The console vibrated softly beneath his fingers. He realized that the crystals in his backpack resonated with the energy of this room. They were connected. The thought thrilled him. Perhaps the shelter was designed not just as a hiding place, but as a guide, a school of knowledge for someone like him. Daniel moved from device to device, examining each one. Some seemed simple, enough to operate, but others were complex with interconnected parts that moved in ways he could not immediately understand. He found a large book resting on a pedestal in the center of the room. Its pages were filled with diagrams, symbols, and illustrations of landscapes, mountains, rivers, and strange glowing structures. As he flipped through the pages, he realized the book explained how to use the crystals, the devices, and the energy of the shelter. He traced a diagram with his finger, noticing the symbols pulsing in time with the crystals in his hands. It was as if the shelter itself was alive, teaching him step by step. Daniel felt a rush of excitement. This was more than he could have ever imagined. He had thought he was lost in the forest, struggling just to survive. Instead, he had discovered a hidden world full of power and knowledge. Suddenly, one of the machines whirred to life. A soft hum grew louder, and a screen-like surface on the console lit up with glowing symbols. Daniel jumped back, startled, but then curiosity overcame his caution. He reached out and the symbols rearranged themselves, forming a pattern that seemed to guide him. He realized the machine was interactive, responding to his presence and the crystals he carried. The larger crystal in the pedestal pulsed brighter, and a narrow beam of light shot from it toward the ceiling, illuminating a pattern in the stone above. Daniel studied it closely. The beam traced a path that led to a small hole, barely noticeable, in the far wall. He realized the hole might be another passage or chamber hidden from view. The shelter was full of secrets, layers upon layers, each waiting to be discovered. Daniel's hands trembled with anticipation as he followed the glowing path. He placed the crystals on a small stone platform, and the energy pulsed through him. The crystals reacted as if alive, and suddenly the beam of light expanded, illuminating a map etched into the wall. The map showed not only the mountains around him, but paths through forests, hidden valleys, rivers, and even structures he could not recognize. The shelter had knowledge of the world far beyond what any normal human could see. He realized that the shelter was not only a place to survive, it was a guide, a protector, and a teacher. Whoever had built this place had left it for someone capable of understanding it, someone who could carry its knowledge and energy into the world. Daniel felt a mix of awe and responsibility. He was no longer just a hiker lost in the mountains. He had been chosen for something greater. The humming of the devices grew louder, and Daniel noticed movement in the shadows. He froze, straining his eyes. Nothing appeared, but he could sense a presence, a gentle awareness in the room. It was not threatening, but it reminded him that this shelter was alive in more ways than one. He realized he was not alone. The shelter had its own consciousness, and it was observing him. With careful steps, Daniel moved toward a console with levers and buttons. He experimented cautiously, adjusting dials and pressing buttons. To his surprise, the machines responded. Lights flashed along the walls, and mechanical parts shifted, revealing hidden compartments filled with more crystals and tools. He realized that the shelter was testing him, guiding him to learn through trial and observation. Every movement he made had a reaction, teaching him how to interact with the energy of the place. Hours passed as he explored, experimented, and studied. The hunger he had felt earlier seemed distant, replaced by a focused energy and clarity. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this shelter be used to help people, to protect them, or even to discover new knowledge about the world? The thought excited him, but he also felt a deep respect for the power around him. He understood that the shelter was ancient, built by someone who had knowledge far beyond normal humans, and that it was now entrusting that knowledge to him. As he continued exploring, Daniel found another door, hidden behind a large crystal formation. The symbols on this door were more intricate, glowing softly. He placed his hand on the symbols, and they pulsed in response. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Beyond it was a smaller chamber, filled with water flowing in gentle streams and more crystals embedded in the stone. The water reflected the glowing light, creating a magical effect. In the center of the chamber was a stone basin, filled with clear water and more glowing crystals floating above it. Daniel stepped closer, feeling a strong pull from the basin. He realized that the water was infused with the energy of the shelter. He reached out, touching the surface, and a warm sensation spread through his fingers and up his arms. The water felt alive, and as he watched, images began to form on the surface. Forests, mountains, rivers, and paths that he could follow. The shelter was showing him not just the local area, but the world beyond. He realized that the crystals, the devices, and the water were all connected. The shelter was a living map, a guide, and a teacher all in one. It had been waiting for someone, capable of understanding it, someone who could learn its secrets and use them wisely. Daniel felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever experienced. He understood that his journey was no longer about survival. It was about discovery, understanding, and responsibility. Suddenly, a faint light flickered in the corner of the room. Daniel turned quickly and saw a small figure emerging from the shadows. It was human-like but translucent, glowing softly in the dim light. Daniel froze, unsure what to do. The figure moved closer, gesturing toward the basin. He realized that it was some kind of guardian, a presence created by the shelter to guide him. The figure's movements were deliberate, calm, and welcoming. Daniel followed the guardian's gestures, observing carefully. The water in the basin shimmered, showing more maps, paths, and symbols. He traced the images with his finger, learning how to interpret the guidance. The guardian's presence was reassuring, reminding him that he was not alone in this journey. The shelter had chosen him, and now it was helping him understand its secrets. By the end of the day, Daniel had learned much about the chamber, the devices, and the water. He felt a new strength within him, both physical and mental. His body had recovered from the hunger and exhaustion, and his mind was sharper, clearer, and focused. He understood that the shelter had changed him. It had given him not just a place to survive, but a purpose and a mission. As he rested that night by the flowing water, Daniel reflected on the day's discoveries. He had found more than just an abandoned shelter. He had found a guide, a teacher, and a source of energy and knowledge far beyond what he could have imagined. The crystals pulsed gently and the water shimmered softly, as if confirming that he was ready for what lay ahead. The forest outside remained quiet, but Daniel no longer felt fear or loneliness. He was part of something greater, a journey that would take him far beyond the mountains and forests he had once thought were the limits of his world. And as he closed his eyes to sleep, the guardian's glow faded into the shadows, leaving him with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring even greater discoveries and challenges. Daniel had survived hunger, exhaustion, and isolation. Now he was ready to survive the mysteries of the shelter and perhaps unlock its greatest secrets. Morning arrived slowly, painting the underground chamber with soft golden light that filtered through the cracks above. Daniel awoke beside the shimmering water, feeling rested and stronger than ever. The crystals pulsed gently in the basin, as if greeting him, and the energy of the shelter flowed through him, steady and calming. He rose, ready to explore deeper, eager to uncover the secrets that still lay hidden. The guardian, the soft glowing figure from the previous day, appeared once again. It floated silently near the water, motioning for Daniel to follow. He understood immediately that the shelter was guiding him forward, teaching him how to interact with its energy and the devices scattered throughout the underground chambers. The sense of purpose within him grew. The hunger, the fatigue, and the fear that had plagued him for days now seemed like a distant memory. Daniel first returned to the main chamber filled with machines and crystals. He approached one of the larger devices, a complex console with levers, buttons, and circular dials. The symbols on the console pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Placing his hands on the surface, he felt the familiar hum of energy traveling through him. The crystals in his backpack vibrated in response. The shelter was teaching him through interaction, and Daniel felt a thrill at each new discovery. With careful movements, he began experimenting. He pulled levers and pressed buttons, observing how the machines responded. Lights flashed along the walls and some panels opened, revealing more compartments filled with crystals, small tools and objects he could not yet identify. Every action seemed to teach him something new, as if the shelter itself had built a learning system for whoever was chosen to find it. Daniel realized that patience, observation, and care were as important as courage. The guardian floated beside him, glowing softly, and guided his attention toward a console with a glowing blue crystal embedded in it. The crystal pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat, and Daniel felt drawn toward it. He placed his hands around it, and suddenly the device responded with a soft hum. Panels opened on the console, revealing moving parts that seemed to be waiting for him to interact. The energy of the crystal spread through his body, sharpening his mind and increasing his awareness. The console projected images onto the chamber walls. Mountains, forests, rivers, and strange structures appeared, glowing in intricate patterns. Daniel realized that the shelter was showing him more than just the underground chambers. It was revealing the larger world, connections that were hidden from ordinary eyes. He could see paths through forests, hidden valleys, and places that seemed untouched by humans for centuries. The shelter had knowledge far beyond anything he had imagined. The guardian floated closer to one of the projected paths, guiding Daniel's attention. He realized the shelter was teaching him to read the energy, the symbols, and the maps. It was not just showing him locations, it was training him to understand and use the knowledge. Daniel felt a thrill of excitement and responsibility. This was no longer a simple hike in the mountains. He had become part of something much larger, something ancient and powerful. Hours passed as he studied the projections, experimented with the consoles, and learned to manipulate the crystals. Each interaction seemed to unlock new information, revealing more of the underground network. Daniel discovered hidden doors, secret passageways, and additional rooms filled with strange devices and glowing crystals. Every discovery left him in awe. The shelter was a place of infinite learning, waiting patiently for someone capable of understanding its secrets. As the day progressed, Daniel found a small door in a corner of the chamber, previously unnoticed. The symbols on it were more intricate than any he had seen. Placing his hand on the door, he felt the energy hum in response. He realized the shelter was encouraging him to open it. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped into a new chamber. This room was different from the others. It was round, with a high ceiling and walls covered in crystal formations that glowed softly. Streams of water flowed along channels in the floor, converging in the center where a large crystal pulsed with radiant light. Daniel felt an immediate connection. The energy here was stronger, more focused. It seemed to welcome him and at the same time challenge him. He approached the central crystal cautiously, placing his hand near it. A wave of warmth and clarity flowed through him. The hum of the crystal filled the room, and for a moment Daniel felt as if he could understand the energy of the shelter directly. Symbols and patterns floated in his mind, forming a language he had never known yet could somehow comprehend. The shelter was teaching him without words, guiding him through experience and intuition. The guardian moved to the edge of the chamber, motioning for Daniel to focus on the central crystal. He did so, and suddenly visions filled his mind. He saw forests, mountains, and rivers, as well as people traveling through hidden paths, discovering places that had been forgotten for generations. He realized that the shelter had been designed not just to hide and protect, but to guide and empower those who were ready to receive its knowledge. Daniel understood the responsibility placed upon him. This was not just about survival or discovery. The shelter had chosen him to learn, to understand, and perhaps to protect its secrets. He felt a deep respect for the unknown builders of this place. Whoever had created the shelter had done so with care, purpose, and wisdom far beyond anything Daniel had imagined. He spent the rest of the day exploring the crystal chamber, learning to channel energy, understand symbols, and follow the paths projected by the central crystal. Each interaction left him stronger, more aware, and more connected to the shelter. Hunger, fear, and exhaustion had vanished completely, replaced by clarity, energy, and focus. Daniel realized that this place was teaching him about more than just the underground world. It was teaching him about himself, his capabilities, and his potential. As evening approached, Daniel returned to the main chamber. The devices and crystals pulsed gently as if acknowledging his progress. He placed the crystals back in the pedestal, and the room seemed to hum in approval. The guardian appeared beside him, glowing softly, as if signaling that Daniel was ready for the next stage of his journey. Daniel sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on everything he had discovered. The shelter was no longer just a hiding place or a source of energy. It was a living guide teaching him patience, observation, and understanding. It was preparing him for challenges he had yet to face. The underground chambers, the machines, and the crystals were all part of a larger purpose, one that he was beginning to understand. Night fell, and the chamber glowed softly with the light of the crystals. Daniel lay down beside the flowing water, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had survived hunger, exhaustion, and isolation, and now he had survived discovery and challenge. The shelter had changed him, strengthened him, and given him a sense of purpose. As he closed his eyes, he realized that the journey was far from over. The shelter held deeper secrets, more powerful devices, and greater knowledge. He would need courage, patience, and intelligence to uncover them all. But Daniel felt ready. He had been chosen, guided, and trained by the shelter itself. The next day would bring new discoveries, new challenges, and perhaps the answers to questions he had not yet thought to ask. The underground chambers pulsed gently with energy, and the guardian's glow faded into the shadows. Daniel drifted into sleep, dreaming of forests, rivers, and mountains he had yet to explore, guided by the knowledge and power of the shelter. He was no longer just a lone hiker. He was a seeker, a learner, and a protector of the secrets hidden deep beneath the forest. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the shelter waited patiently, ready to reveal even greater mysteries when Daniel was ready to face them. The first light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the stone ceiling, illuminating the underground chambers with a soft, golden glow. Daniel awoke with a sense of purpose. His journey had taken him far beyond a simple struggle for survival. The shelter had taught him patience, focus, and the hidden ways of the energy that flowed through it. Today, he knew, he would discover the ultimate secret. He rose carefully, feeling the hum of the crystals in his backpack. They pulsed in harmony with the energy of the shelter, as if guiding him forward. The guardian, soft and glowing, appeared immediately, floating near the central crystal chamber. Daniel understood that it was time. He followed the figure, stepping over the smooth stone floor and moving past the smaller devices and rooms he had already explored. The guardian led him to a larger chamber at the far end of the shelter. This room was unlike any other. The ceiling arched high and walls were lined with hundreds of glowing crystals, pulsing in rhythm as if breathing. In the center was a pedestal, larger than any Daniel had seen before, holding a single enormous crystal that radiated brilliant light. Streams of energy flowed from it, connecting to every corner of the room and even extending into the walls and floor. Daniel could feel the energy pulling him closer, warming him, strengthening him, and awakening a deep sense of understanding within him. He approached the pedestal cautiously. The crystal's light was almost blinding, yet it felt comforting. Daniel reached out, placing his hands on the smooth surface. Instantly, visions filled his mind. He saw the forests, rivers, and mountains surrounding the shelter, and beyond them lands he had never imagined. Hidden valleys, ancient ruins, and paths through wild forests stretched before him. He could see people walking those paths, discovering places long forgotten, guided by invisible energy, just as he had been guided. The shelter was revealing its true purpose. It had been built not merely as a refuge or a guide, but as a tool to preserve knowledge, protect the earth, and prepare someone capable of understanding its power. Daniel realized that the creators of this place had known there would come a day when someone, chosen and worthy, would unlock its secrets. That someone was him. The enormous crystal pulsed stronger, and Daniel felt the energy flow through his entire body. It was not just physical power. It was knowledge, clarity, and awareness. Symbols, patterns, and connections that he had struggled to understand before now made perfect sense. The shelter was alive, and he was now connected to it in a way he could not have imagined. The guardian hovered silently, observing, guiding, and offering reassurance. Daniel took a deep breath. He understood that he had been trained to use this energy wisely. With it, he could navigate hidden paths, reveal knowledge lost to time, and perhaps protect the delicate balance of the forests, rivers, and mountains around him. The shelter was not just a place to survive. It was a responsibility, a gift, and a mission. He studied the crystal further and noticed a pattern forming within its light. It was a map larger and more intricate than any he had seen. It showed hidden locations throughout the region, places where energy from the earth was strongest and where nature needed protection. Daniel realized that the shelter had preserved this knowledge for generations, waiting for someone capable of understanding and using it. For hours he explored the chamber, tracing the paths within the crystal and learning how to interpret the glowing maps. The guardian guided him gently, showing him the connections between the crystals, the underground chambers, and the world above. Daniel's mind felt sharper, his senses heightened, and his spirit inspired. He had never felt more alive. Eventually, Daniel understood how to use the energy safely. The crystals responded to his touch, pulsing brighter or dimmer as he adjusted his focus. He realized that he could not only see the hidden paths and secrets of the land, but he could also influence them, protect them, and share their knowledge when the time was right. The shelter had been waiting for someone capable of wielding this power responsibly. And now that someone was ready, as evening approached, Daniel returned to the main crystal chamber, the guardian hovering nearby. The energy of the shelter flowed around him, and he felt a deep connection to every stone, stream, and tree in the underground chambers. He knew that his journey had transformed him. He was no longer a lost hiker struggling to survive. He was a guardian of secrets, a protector of knowledge, and a guide for the paths hidden in the forests, mountains, and valleys around him. For the first time in days, Daniel felt complete peace. Hunger, fatigue, and fear were gone. He had learned patience, focus, and understanding. He had discovered the energy of the shelter and connected with its purpose. And now he understood his role to explore, learn, and protect. The forest above and the hidden world below were connected, and he was a part of that balance. Night fell, and the glowing crystals bathed the chamber in soft light. Daniel lay down near the central pedestal, letting the energy flow through him one last time before rest. The guardian remained near the crystal, its glow soft but steady. Daniel felt gratitude, respect, and determination. The shelter had chosen him, taught him, and prepared him for a new life beyond mere survival. As he drifted into sleep, Daniel dreamed of paths through forests, hidden valleys, and mountain trails bathed in sunlight. He saw people discovering secret places, guided by the knowledge and energy of the shelter. He understood that the world above was full of mysteries, and that he had the ability to uncover and protect them. His dreams were filled with visions of exploration, discovery, and guardianship. The night passed peacefully, the crystals pulsing rhythmically, as if in harmony with Daniel's heartbeat. The shelter had fulfilled its purpose in guiding him, and Daniel had risen to meet the challenge. He was ready for whatever lay ahead, confident in his strength, knowledge, and connection to the energy around him. When the morning sun rose again, Daniel stood at the entrance of the shelter, looking out at the mountains and forests beyond. The journey that had begun with hunger, exhaustion, and isolation had transformed into discovery, purpose, and responsibility. The shelter, once a hidden refuge, had become his guide, teacher, and partner in the world above. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the fresh mountain air fill his lungs. He adjusted his backpack, now carrying the crystals and knowledge of the shelter, ready to step into the world with new eyes. He knew there would be challenges, unseen paths, and mysteries to uncover, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. The shelter's energy flowed within him, and its wisdom guided his steps. With one final glance back at the abandoned shelter, Daniel smiled. The place that had seemed quiet, lonely, and forgotten had transformed his life. It had tested him, guided him, and given him the knowledge and strength to face whatever lay ahead. He stepped forward into the forest, feeling the connection between the underground chambers and the world above, ready to explore, protect, and discover. And as he walked through the forest, the crystals pulsed gently in his backpack, reminding him that the shelter's secrets were now part of him, and that his journey of discovery, guardianship, and adventure was only just beginning. Daniel was no longer just a lone hiker. He was a seeker, a learner, a protector, and a guide. The abandoned shelter had changed everything, and now the world awaited him,